What's happening? Where's the music? Well, that is disappointing. We've never not had that play, but technical difficulties. It is what it is. Welcome to the Fantasy Rant podcast. Off to a hot start. I am your host, Dan Baker, here with our co-hosts Lee Cook and Mason Beck. I almost said Lee Beck and Mason Cook. That just felt wrong. All
We
right,
both just
so
leave. Once you say that, we're just both out, and you're doing it by yourself tonight.
this all I have to do is cover every player in every week 3 game. That is what we are talking about today. We are doing our starts and sits for every player in every game. Don't worry, we're going to brush over those players that you know you should start or you know you should sit. But we're doing this with the context of a half PPR, 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 1 tight end, 2 flex league. Basically, your regular run-of-the-mill league here, trying to give everybody as much as they can take away from this. The one thing I wanted to add too is we did add flex. So it's not just start or sit. You can choose to throw them in your flex rather than start. And boys, I took start as in they are going to be a top 24 player. You know, they are in your wide receiver or running back slot. So let's dive into it. 16 games, a lot to get through. First one, we have Thursday night football. Patriots heading to the Jets. 6.5-point favorites are the Jets. Pretty lofty favorites. I was kind of surprised to see that with New England playing strong through the first 2 weeks. But that being said, we said starts and sits were pretty obvious on this one. You're sitting Brissett, Antonio Gibson, any wide receiver. Aaron Rodgers, you're going to sit him, Alan Lazard, Mike Williams, Tyler Conklin, and then Braylon Allen. I said sit. Everyone said sit, but I think you do need to roster him. I think he's probably one of the best handcuffs to have in the NFL right now. Incredible talent there. The one that we had a little bit of a disagreement on is me and Lee said basically Henry is either a streamer or a back end tight end one, whereas Mason said to sit him. Mason, after Hunter Henry coming off of the game that he did, explain yourself, sir.
I mean, obviously, a pretty incredible game for Hunter Henry. 12 targets, 9 receptions, 109 yards, and 2 TDs, or no TDs.
No TDs, yeah.
Um, do you really expect him to get 12 targets again, especially with how poor this New England offense is? I don't really expect there to be any consistency in any tight end or receiver to be maintaining that amount of volume, those amount of yards. He wasn't necessarily always breaking off for big plays. It was, average, 9 catches. Yeah, or sorry, it was 8 catches for 109 yards. Nothing super wow you away in yards per catch. It just, he might be decent if you're desperate, but I'm not trusting it, especially after week 1, only getting 2 receptions for 18 yards. I don't think there's really any trust there. I don't have faith in New England, and I do think this Jets defense is definitely a lot better than what they've been playing like so far.
I do think the Jets defense is good enough to take away their top passing option and limit the run game. They got some pretty solid coverage linebackers. Obviously, we know about the DBs there. But right now, the over 2 weeks in a half PPR format, the tight end 7 is averaging 6.8 points per game. I'm not expecting Hunter Henry to get 12 targets or over 100 yards again, but if he can give me 7 points right now, that's tight end 7. So, that's as much as I would say on it. Not expecting a blowaway game. Just it's really easy to be a tight end 1 right now.
Yeah, that was my thought as well. I mean, with Ingram possibly out again, Njoku, Ferguson, we got a few of our top 12 guys aren't playing at all. And the back end of the top 12 has been off, really outside of like your top 3. It's been really rough at the tight end position. No, he's probably not going to get 75% of the team's receiving yards again this week. But Sauce Gardner, he's going to take away. They're not going to put Sauce on Hunter Henry. He's going to be on, whatever receiver, maybe Jalen Polk. he's going to be the first read every time for Jacoby Brissett. That's enough to start the tight end for me.
Yeah, my main concern, Quinnen Williams is solid in coverage. I do think that they can take him away. So limit your expectations compared to last week, but I would start him up. The other starts that we had are obviously Brees Hall, Garrett Wilson, and Ramondre Stevenson. Stevenson's just getting that workload, pretty reliable despite a tough matchup. All right, let's move on to the next game. We got the Chargers heading to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's favored by 2 in this one. Some of the easy ones we had: Justin Herbert, Gus Edwards, not Quentin Johnson, Joshua Palmer, Hayden Hurst, all sits for the Chargers. Justin Fields, Jalen Warren, any Pitt wide receiver other than George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth, all sits for all three of us. Some of the names we wanted to bring up: J.K. Dobbins. I had him listed as a flex. Mason and Lee had him listed as a start. The reason why I personally have him just a little notch down on the totem pole is the first 2 games he played against the Raiders and the Panthers. The Chargers were in a pretty commanding lead through 6 of the 8 quarters in those games. Last year, also, Carolina gave up the 6th most points in PPR formats to running backs, and the Raiders the 9th most points to running backs. So Pittsburgh's going to be their first real test of the season, in my opinion. I think that they aren't likely to be in a positive game script, maybe a neutral, could be trailing here or there, not like Pittsburgh has an explosive offense. But yeah, I just think that JK is a solid flex, especially with the burst he's been giving us. But I don't think that he is worth a top. I don't think he'll finish in the top 24 RBs.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think this is going to be a very tight game, but I don't think it's going to be super high scoring. So, you might think that may lead to more passing, but it also might just lead to them relying off their backs, trying to force big plays, especially when J.K. Dobbins is definitely looking like the better playmaker than Gus Edwards in that backfield. And I think that there's still a good chance that they do rely on him, even if it's a pretty nitty-gritty game.
I just don't think you could even think about sitting him after the first 2 weeks, and I don't have it in front of me. I was trying to double check. Is he what, RB2, RB3 on the season right now? One game can be an anomaly, but once you do that for 2 games, and again with so many injuries out there, he just feels like a slam dunk start until further notice.
Yeah, in full PPR, he is RB4 on the season right now. Obviously, great start. I just do think it's a little bit dependent on those easier matchups. Some of the other players, Lad McConkey, I have as a sit, Mason as a flex, and Lee as a sit. And then it was the same thing for Quentin Johnston. Seems like neither Lee or I are banking on, we don't want to rely on a Chargers wide receiver quite yet. But Mason, what are you seeing here?
Yeah, I'm okay with starting Quentin Johnston at the flex, honestly. It's kind of weird to say. There is a lot of options I would go to before him, but I'm not super upset if I'm having to play him at one of my flex positions. Last week, he did get the most receptions. Had a good week, finished with 22 points. Obviously, a lot of it was banked off of the 2 touchdowns against the Panthers, not expecting 2 touchdowns from him. Really, that might be the only time the season that happens this season. But he might be the leading wide receiver 1 as of now for the Chargers, at least until McConkey can improve a little bit, really get acclimated to the NFL. But people forget what Herbert can do. And if Johnson can be the wide receiver 1 there, which he showed last week that he can, it's definitely worth the flex risk.
All right. We had a comment come in. Let's see here. So he's asking us to rate the parlay. So Brees Hall over 4.5 receptions. And we talked about that. Brees plays against the Patriots. Rashee Rice over 66.5 receiving yards. Nico Collins over 74.5 receiving yards. And J.K. Dobbins over 58.5 rushing yards. Curious to hear what the payout would be. Like, what are the odds on that? I do like Brees to go over that mark. I like Rasheed to go over that mark, and Collins to go over that mark. I am a little bit questionable about J.K. Dobbins, as I was stating, but he does have great burst. It would really only take one breakaway run for him to hit that mark. Maybe, well, plus a little bit. But what are you guys thinking? I would probably give it a B plus.
I love it. I'm in. Thank you for commenting and watching, Jonathan. I'm tailing you. I'm jumping on that one. I'm going to get it in as soon as the show's over.
Love that.
Yeah,
Mason?
I mean, I'd say it's a pretty solid one. I mean, I was just hyping up Dobbins. He's been hot, but there is obviously that risk of him. There's still a little uncertainty. Will that, will he keep the hot hand? And then,
Yeah, I love the Rasheed.
It
The
looks
Rasheed
solid.
line's great there.
Yeah.
I don't know what the odds are alone on that one, but if that's anywhere to 100, I'm more of the person that'll throw a larger amount on something, one bet that I really believe in than a parlay personally. But that is nice. Rasheed Rice is definitely going to get a few extra targets, especially being the guy that gets the targets close to the line of scrimmage, and then missing Pacheco. They're going to manufacture the run game through quick little gadgety plays like that. All right, payout for the first one is $10 bet for $150 payout.
Collins also worries me a little bit because he's going to worry me for his over bets every single week. I mean, he's going to hit it, I feel like, a lot of the time, but Tank Dell's due. I mean, he's been awful, but once you start factoring him in, Nico is going to go down a little bit. So that does worry me, but who knows when that's going to be.
Right, and the Minnesota cornerbacks are not the most youthful bunch, and Nico Collins is big and fast. So I think it'll work. Another one of those players where it just takes one to hit. Really quickly, we'll touch on this one a bit quicker. But he says he also has another parlay: Olave over 65.5, Garrett Wilson over 39.5, Ramondre Stevenson over 16.5 rushing attempts, Brock Bowers over 47.5 receiving yards, Hunter Henry over 19.5 receiving yards. So the one that definitely worries me is Olave over 65.5. Just hasn't shown as much of a connection with Derek Carr as I would like to see, especially with us seeing some success, not some success, like great success with Rashid Shaheed. Hopefully they get him a little bit more involved. Philly is another DB group where, they have youth on the team, but they're not experienced. And then they're older players like Darius Slay, we just saw give up that game-winning touchdown to London. Not pretty over there in this secondary.
Yeah, I'm out on this one, Jonathan. If you can cash out and get your full bet back, cash out and put that money on your first parlay. Double down on your first parlay. Take the money off of this one. There's just a little bit too many moving parts. I agree on the Olave. I'm not Ramondre at 16.5 with the amount of looks and touches Gibson got in this last game scares me. I know Bowers looked great. That one scares me. This one feels like a much longer shot than your first one.
All right. So we're going to get back to the game previews here. We got on the other side of the ball, Najee Harris was our biggest question mark. We got George Pickens as a clear start. Najee Harris, I have him as a flex, Mason and Lee as a start. And honestly, I'm just kind of curious what you guys are seeing on this. Right now, the running back carries are, going towards Najee, but he's not doing much with it. The Steelers aren't moving the ball. The Chargers have been playing really solid defense so far, albeit against weaker competition. I just don't see Najee being the guy unless he falls into the end zone, cracking the top 24.
So what is your name, Dan? What's your screen name here?
Follow the volume. Yes, sir.
That's what we're doing. 37 carries. 37 carries in the first two games.
Yeah.
Sign me up for – there's just not very many running backs who are going to get that kind of volume. I disagree a little bit because they move the ball. They stall when they get inside the 30 or 20. But they move the ball. I think Justin Fields is getting more comfortable. Maybe Jalen Warren gets back to full health and takes away a little bit of that. But when you're getting that much volume, sign me up. Sign me up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all about volume too. Like Lee said, when Warren does come back and he's fully, I mean, he has been back, but when he's fully healthy, 100%, he that does scare you a little bit. He's going to probably take a little bit of increase in carries, but Najee's still probably going to get 15 carries minimum. This team's struggling. I believe they only have one touchdown between both weeks, if I'm not mistaken. That's got to change at some point. Najee's going to start scoring touchdowns, and I mean, look at what he did last week. I mean, 8.4 the week before, 8.9. If you add a touchdown to either of those, they're pretty solid performances.
Right. That's the only. I think he could fall into the end zone, but right now he hasn't been doing anything with the 37 carries over 2 games. I do think that Warren's going to continue to see his health improve, get more touches, and right now he seems like they're receiving back regardless. Najee only has 2 catches over those 2 games. So we'll see how it goes. Chargers so far, again, weak competition, but they have allowed the 6th least rushing yards in the NFL per game so far. All right, next game we got Houston at Minnesota. Minnesota is the underdog by 2.5 points, coming off of a dub against Mason's 49ers. Just really quick, Mason, how does that feel? I'm talking so much smack about the Commanders.
It feels pretty bad. Just we came out week 1 firing, smoke the Jets. Was like, oh yeah, this is great. There's a lot of worries coming into week 1 with Ayuk and Trent Williams not really being there, and then injury concerns with CMC not playing. Then just week 2, it all fell apart, and the nightmare that I thought there was a chance of happening came to reality, and we looked awful. And then now Debo's hurt, and everything is just sad. Nothing is going okay in San Francisco.
Okay. So we're going to touch on these games real quick. We got CJ Stroud, clear start. Nico Collins, obvious. On the other side of the ball, Aaron Jones is start. JJ is the start. All of those are clear and obvious to you guys. The question of the day, though, if Joe Mixon does end up missing this game, Damian Pierce or Cam Akers could get the start. You guys think that they will name a clear starter? Because Pierce looked solid in the preseason. Akers came in, did okay in relief since Pierce was out of this one. Pierce was out of the week 2 with a hamstring injury, so definitely weigh that in. But where do you guys stand on it? Lee, you're already shaking your head, so I'll send it your way.
Yeah, I think if Mixon is out, that just puts Stephon Diggs a bit higher for me. They're gonna pass in lieu of the run with some of those short passes. I love all 3 receivers, and I know we'll get to Tank in a minute, but for this game, especially with Mixon, even if he plays, I don't expect him to be his week 1 self. I expect him to lean on that pass game a la last season. And as you said, Minnesota's pass defense has not been great. They've given up the most deep passes or either the best deep percentage, one of the two, after 2 weeks. And just give me all of the Texans this week. Would love to start Stroud and any of those 3 receivers. If I have 2 of them on the same team, which is not advised, but we know that's out there, I'm starting them both. I'm starting them all.
Interesting.
I mean, I would agree with the wide receivers as well. Like that. They're going to pass Cam Akers, Damian Pierce, whoever's starting. If Cam Akers is starting, I have some interest in him. Maybe putting him at the flex if you're pretty desperate there. But if Damian Pierce is starting, no, he sucks. Cam Akers has, he shown flashes in the past, but he's also had just complete bust games that are gonna lose you. It's just Cam Akers is more the one I would trust if he gets to start, but it's going to be terrible. It's going to be terrible for both of them, probably. It's going to be wide receiver heavy, like Lee said, which Tank Dell, it gives him some upside finally to do something. I think it's going to be mostly Diggs, though.
Yeah, I mean, so I do think that the the Texans they've been relying on the run a decent amount. They've been setting up their play action and deep passes with the run. Right now, they have 54% of their plays are passing plays. I think the majority of the time they're going to get to the red zone. They're going to have an opportunity to score. I do think Damian Pierce is more likely to score a touchdown this week than Najee Harris is. Would I put a bet down on that? No, because who even knows if Joe Mixon misses this game, if Cam Akers decide if he's the one because Damian Pierce has the injury. But I think if there is a clear started listed, that you could throw them in the flex and do worse. For the wide receivers, I'm sitting Tank Dell until we see it. Right now, he's ran 2 less routes than Stephon Diggs, but he has done pretty much nothing during the first 2 games. He has a total of 37 yards. After having 40 yards in week 1, he had -3 in week 2. I love Tank Dell. I don't understand why it's not working, why they didn't leave off with that same chemistry as we've seen prior, the entire time prior. But I really do think that I'm going to need to see it before I throw him into a starting lineup in any capacity. Then the last guy we had, Dalton Schultz. Mason, you have him listed as a start, and me and Lee have him as a sit.
Just because it's kind of like how you guys said earlier, tight ends have been pretty inconsistent. And just if Cam Akers or Damian Pierce are the starter there, like we said, it's going to be more pass heavy. We're going to trust him at really any point this year. Besides, if any of the wide receivers go down, now is the time to trust them.
All right. So on the other side of the ball, only guys that we really had in question, everybody was a sit. But Lee, you have Ty Chandler listed as a flex. What did you see there? I obviously we saw he had a good game in week 2. But the 10 carries for 82 yards, I believe that's what it was, right?
That's right.
All right. So do you think he's enough involved where he could have a good week, or do you see what are you seeing in this one?
Yeah, so he looks explosive. On the season, he's had 8 carries and then 10 carries. The first game obviously wasn't great, but you combine the two, he's averaging 5.5 a carry. He got 8.2 in the last game. Only 3 receptions, which is a little bit concerning, but I just feel like he's carved out enough of the role where you don't want to lean on Aaron Jones too much with his age and injury history. So of the guys who are clear backups, to me, he is probably the most valuable in the league right now.
Oh wow!
I love Ty Chandler's game. It's not just because he went to Carolina, finished up his career at Carolina. He's a guy who, if Aaron Jones were to get hurt, I think he's immediately an RB1. I think he's a top 12 running back if Aaron Jones gets hurt. And even without that, I see him, especially in this game where they're very likely going to be behind and game script could dictate they're going to have to throw the ball more than they have the first couple of weeks. I see him at least doubling his reception number and getting enough carries to really be a nice RB, back end RB2, definitely a flex guy. Saw some people dropping him after week 1. If that happened in your league, go pick him up immediately. Ty Chandler is a guy who standalone value plus that injury insurance that if Aaron Jones, not if, when he gets hurt and misses a game or 2, you're going to be thankful you have him on your bench.
You're just saying that because you want Aaron Jones to get hurt because he didn't tip you for your Uber drive.
Hey, look, I still have a grudge with Aaron Jones, but I do own him on a team or 2. But I would not own him without owning Ty Chandler. If you own Aaron Jones, I'm trying to get Ty Chandler cheap in trade if somebody else has it. But he has more pop.
Yeah, I do think that Ty Chandler is explosive as hell. The lack of receiving work, like you said, is a little bit worrying. He did get 3 receptions in week 1, but none in week 2. I think that Aaron Jones really has that role locked down. I love Ty Chandler in Dynasty. I am not starting him or flexing him in redraft unless we see an injury or a more clear split in the snap percentage. been at 35% in both week 1 and week 2.
Real quick, just to add, because I just know, sorry, Mason, but I just noticed, Aaron Jones had 9 carries for 32 yards. So he out carried and completely outclassed as far as what he was able to gain against Mason's 49ers this past week.
Thanks,
Yeah,
man.
and it was
that last little, push in there. But, I mean, Aaron Jones got all the receiving work between the two backs, and that's huge in PPR. Even half PPR leagues, that's a bigger difference. I mean, Ty Chandler might look better. It's just if you're putting him in your lineup, whether it reflects him or not, there is a higher risk of him not getting really any touches in certain weeks. They were kicking the crap out of the Niners, so they might have said, hey, let's rest the older vet. Let's run the younger guy a little more.
Right. I mean, it's 10 carries for 82 yards is great for an NFL game for your team. Right now, it's giving us 8.2 points, and I don't expect him to have that efficiency each week, and I don't think he's going to be the red zone threat or the receiving back. So until we see, more involvement, I'm sitting him personally. I'm going to skip over Jordan Addison here. We did have me and Mason had him as a flex if he's healthy. We had him as a sit. I think there's a little bit of give and take there. He is a little bit boomer bust and touchdown dependent, but we got a lot of ground to cover here. So I'm going to get on to the next one. We got Philly at New Orleans. Philly pretty clear as well, especially with A.J. Brown out. We got Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, Devonta Smith, all his starts. Jahan Dotson, if you're rostering him, don't. And then Dallas Goedert, low end tight end 1 start is what I said. Mason had him listed as a start, and then Lee had him as a sit. Lee, I want to hear from you. You were pretty high on Dallas Goedert heading into the season. Now AJ Brown is out, and granted, it did not work in week 2 for Goddard, but not feeling confident enough to start him.
No, I mean the Saints defense has looked really good, and I like some of the back end guys more. Like for example, I would start Hunter Henry over Dallas Goedert this week. To me, I feel like you're right now the ceiling isn't really there for Goddard, and the floor is pretty minimal. Obviously, if you're in a situation where you have no other options, but there's quite a few guys that I would like to start over him. Beyond Hunter Henry, to go down the list, I would say, obviously, this is a tough one, but I would even consider like a Noah Fant in that game against the Dolphins. Isaiah Likely, I know he had a skunk week last week, but in that game against Dallas, there's just a lot of guys who provide a ceiling, and I just don't think the floor is high enough without any evidence of a ceiling right now. They're going to run the ball when they get close. Now you've got Saquon plus Jalen Hurts, taking those rushing touchdowns from close in. That's where he's really provided value. It hasn't been big touchdowns over his career. It's being that target in the red zone, and they're just so efficient running the ball. He's a guy for me that I'm nervous to play unless I have no other options.
This may be the first time ever that any of us have, besides me, have ever said something good about Noah Fant, and I appreciate it.
That's what the smile was for. I was
good stuff to hear. That's my number one thing. My second thing is if you have so little faith in him that you don't even want to start him, will you just finally trade him to me, dude? Like, just give me Goddard.
The price.
Pretty fair
Colby
point.
Parkinson's another guy I would start over Goddard this week if I had Colby Parkinson, and that's a big swing. But they have nobody to catch the ball.
I mean, I'm a big Parkinson fan, as we know from the offseason, but after last week with Kupp missing half the game, Puka out the entire game, and he got 2 targets and 1 reception for 12 yards. Going up against San Fran this week, they got good coverage linebackers. I'm not banking on Parkinson personally. I would definitely start Goddard over him. But I do agree with the point that there is a very low ceiling on top of limited upside now. with how they're running the offense. The one thing I did want to say is I do think that like Devonta Smith, a lot of us were looking into where he would be lined up in week 1 under the new regime with Kellen Moore. He had a ton of snaps from the slot. 70.7% of snaps ran from the slot in week 1. AJ Brown out in week 2. That drops to 39.5% for Devonta Smith. I think that opens up some of the middle ground for Dallas Goedert. I think he could jump in, operate over the middle of the field, and hopefully turn some of those opportunities into bigger gains. He's still an athletic guy, even after the injuries. So hoping that turns into a little bit of something. Did anyone else have anything to add on that? Solid. So on the other side of the ball for the Saints, we got Derek Carr, Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave, and Rashid Shaheed all listed as starts. The only one there, Mason had Rashid Shaheed listed as a flex. Really don't think that's worth diving too much into there. Jamal Williams is a sit, as well as Foster Moreau, Jawan Johnson, and Taysom Hill. I do think Foster Moreau is worth looking at in dynasty leagues. Clearly the snap leader on the team. Jawan Johnson's kind of taking the back seat there. He did have the preseason injury, so maybe that's a part of it. But I think Foster Moreau could be on his way up sooner than later. So next game we got going, Denver at Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is favored by 6.5. Your two favorite quarterbacks in the league, Mason. Bo Nix, rookie of the year, and Baker Mayfield, like MVP. Of course, Baker Mayfield's the MVP this year, right?
Yeah, I mean, I always hype up Mayfield and Bo Nix. I love me some Jared Goff too. So last week I got Baker versus Goff. This week I get Nix versus Baker. It's beautiful to see 2 weekends in a row.
How do you love Jared Goff now? Do you love all the mediocre quarterbacks in the NFL or what?
Nah, dude, Jared Goff's just a joke because like his last couple of years on the Rams, just the way he would like fall to pressure was so sad, and it's like the turnovers were hilarious. And then I just kind of like his like redemption. How he's kind of redeemed himself. So,
Gotcha.
and he's a
I do like a
California.
redemption story, and that's a similar thread with Baker, and seems to be where Bo Nix is potentially heading so far. So we got a thread, common thread. So for the start in this one, though, loved your comment, Lee. Bo Nix is not even a starter in 3 QB leagues, which in 3 QB leagues, that is 36 starting quarterbacks, and there are 32 in the NFL. So you'd be starting backup QBs over Bo Nix.
Yes.
Yes. Made me laugh.
I'll put in Jeff Driscoll just in case Jaden gets hurt.
Driscoll, oh man, that was the Browns' 5th starting quarterback last season. Record for a team to still make it in the playoffs and have 5 starting QBs. Just want to say that. But Javonte Williams was one of the guys we had a slight question on. I have him as a low-end flex, where you guys have him as a sit. Just super quick. That was just based on the receiving work. He is the clear-cut receiving running back on this team. Now that Audric Estime has been put on IR, he's going to miss another 3 games. Leaves just him and Julian McLaughlin. Leads in snaps, leads in targets, leads in carries. So low-end flex for me. Then I thought this was interesting. Lee, you have Courtland Sutton and Josh Reynolds listed as a sit. I personally have Courtland Sutton as a sit and Josh Reynolds as a flex. And I think the more, common belief is what Mason has here with Sutton as a flex and Reynolds as a sit. I'll talk about it because I think I have the more unusual belief here. But I just think that Josh Reynolds fits the scheme of Sean Payton and the play style of Bo Nix much more than Courtland Sutton does. I think that he will gradually work his way into solidifying himself as the wide receiver too. And I do think that if you're in a full PPR league, he's a little bit more attractive than in a half PPR league. But I do like Josh Reynolds at least as a bench stash, and you can get him in pretty much all of your leagues. Last I looked, I think it was 10% rostered in Sleeper. Let's see. Yep, 10% rostered. Mason?
Oh, sorry, I was looking at some other notes.
Josh Reynolds versus Cortland Sutton.
Oh yeah, Cortland Sutton, of course. I'm going with him, and I was high on him at the beginning of the season. I think I talked about him when we were talking about our wide receiver rankings. I don't know. I'm not really trusting either of them. Bo Nix is really disappointing me. Obviously, he is a rookie, so you know everyone is already disappointed in them because after 2 weeks, none of them have really lit up. Jaden Daniels is looking pretty good though. That there you go, Lee. He'll be hurt in 2 years, and you'll be looking for another quarterback. But he's not getting it done right now. It just Sutton, I think, is the more talented wide receiver, so I would just trust him. He's the more seasoned guy who I think Knicks just has a better chance of, having more volume going his way on a consistent basis.
Yeah. Really quick, my bad that I missed a couple of comments here, but we have one coming in, DK Metcalf or Zay Flowers. Without context of the league format, I am going with Zay Flowers. 21 targets over 2 games, 91 yards in the last game alone, and a touchdown. Much more, all the targets are going to him or Mark Andrews, whereas DK Metcalf has JSN with 16 targets last week, Tyler Lockett to compete against. And on top of it, the matchup. Zay Flowers is going to play against Dallas. I think that has much higher potential for a shootout than DK Metcalf going up against Miami with Skylar Thompson leading the team. Maybe Tyler Huntley gets in there, but that would be pretty crazy with the limited amount of time he's had to practice with the team. So that's where I lean. Where do you guys lean, boys?
I actually have this same decision in a league.
Oh, wow.
Like I literally last week there was an injury and I was able to play them both, but I think I'm going to only be able to play one this week. I'm going DK Metcalf. Simply, he's the better wide receiver. He's the better NFL player, and like I said, I think he's much more likely to rip off that huge one. I see a lot of games this year where Zay is going to give you a solid floor, 6 to 8 receptions for 50 to 70 yards. But the touchdowns are going to be few and far between, and he just does not have the ceiling that DK Metcalf has.
I'm looking into it right now. Jalen Ramsey being on the Miami, who DK is going against. Obviously, they used to play a lot more, being division rivals when Ramsey was on the Rams. Kind of looking at it, very mixed performances. Pretty reliant off of big plays. Is there really going to be a need for big plays from this team from Seattle against Skylar Thompson, kind of like Dan said? I'm not really trusting DK as much. I do think he is a better player, so I'm just going to go ahead and go Flowers because of the matchup that DK has. I think Ramsey's he's going to lock him up on the more shorter game. DK is not really going to get as much of a chance for the deep ball.
All right. So we had one more here. Fantasy RB. All right. So his running backs are Brees Hall, Jordan Mason, David Montgomery, Braylon Allen, Samaje P. Ryan, Checo probably on the IR. Amari Cooper, Rashee Rice, T. Higgins, Cooper Kupp, 2 guys that have been out. Whittington, Quinston Johnston, and then tight ends are Travis Kelce and Hunter Henry. It's a 10-man PPR. What kind of trade would he make for a wide receiver? I don't know what your record is right now. If you are anything under 2-0, I would be trying to offer up Cooper Kupp for you're going to trade him for much lower than his value is when he's healthy, obviously. but he's going to be down for a few games. He might have a slow return, even with Puka probably out for a little bit longer. I would personally try to trade Cup, and then I would say Jordan Mason, since he is a product that is going to expire essentially as soon as Christian McCaffrey gets back. I would trade that to a team that is 1-1, can afford. Oh, you said he's 2-0 right now. So that does honestly help your situation to keep Cooper Cup. Um, Maybe throw in Jordan Mason, who is going to kill it this week, and Quentin Johnston, who's coming off of a solid performance. Try to turn it into a wide receiver too. I think it's too. Chris Godwin's been doing too well to get a guy like him, but that style of player where it's not exciting people and they're willing to let him go. I'll think of a name soon.
So yeah, I'm with you, Dan. You kind of stole. I wouldn't trade Cup right now because they did not put him on the IR. Hopefully, he's going to make that quick turnaround. Jordan Mason is the guy I would trade. There is one team in your league who he's going to be the most valuable to. You find the Christian McCaffrey owner and you offer Jordan Mason for the best wide receiver he has on his team, and work from there.
Yeah, that's kind of how I'd go. But honestly, if anything, maybe I would kind of be looking to trading for a running back, because with that Pacheco injury, I believe you guys can correct me if you know. I believe it was 6 to 8 weeks is what they're kind of thinking.
Yep, minimum of 6. They said
McCaffrey's probably going to be back before that. Then after that, you got really Brees Hall, Monty. I mean, you got Braylon Allen in case Brees Hall goes back down, but who knows? Gibbs still might not be 100% after that hamstring injury he suffered. Once he's back to full health, Monty could really start to see even more. He could see a dip in his workload. So I don't know. I mean, once Higgins is back and Cup, if you're 2-0, try to hold off for one more week at least. And if your team just looks awful after this week with just the injuries, then maybe start to make some moves. But I would still try to hold off for one more week or try to trade Mason away.
Here's what I would do. I'm looking at it right now. So just to give you direct names for a trade offer, I would go T. Higgins and Jordan Mason for Garrett Wilson and then Jalen Warren. A running back that has upside, that should continue to get healthier and have some standalone value. And then Garrett Wilson has underperformed. Right now, he has a total of 17.2 points in half PPR leagues. Hasn't scored more than 9 points in half PPR leagues. So underperformed, could get him on the cheap. T. Higgins has the hopeful upside of when he returns, maybe he's going to help turn this Bengal offense around. All right. One last comment. We'll hit this one super quick. PPR league, start one. Najee Harris, Zach Moss, Keenan Allen. We talked about Najee Harris already. Najee this week is going up against, help me guys, who's he going up against?
We just talked about them, didn't we?
I know, Atlanta. He's going up against Atlanta.
Did you say Najee?
Najee.
No, they played week 1. Chargers.
My bad. Atlanta was last week.
1,000%.
First week.
So I am not starting Keenan Allen in this one. I'll say that much. Has burned us too many times coming off an injury, leaving early. I would probably go Zach Moss against Washington, although he has not been very, hasn't inspired hope in his managers. I think this is going to be a good matchup for him and probably the biggest workload he sees. And we talked about Najee. I'm personally not big on him. Curious to see where you guys sit.
Zach Moss, because he's playing the worst defense in the league. Devin Singletary looked great last week. Rashad White and Bucky Irvin both looked really good. They're down, Higgins. They're desperate for a win. This is going to be Zach Moss's best week so far, and I don't think it's going to be close. Yeah, I'm smashing Zach Moss. I like Najee. I already said it this week, but I'm a realist. The Washington defense has a long way to go, and he's going to have some open lanes. I like him to catch some balls. He's dominating the workload versus Chase Brown. I wouldn't mind grabbing a Zach Moss 2+ anytime touchdown. I bet we were talking about those earlier.
Well, my first reaction when I look at it is definitely sitting Keenan Allen. DJ Moore is the only wide receiver on that team that I'm even thinking about really playing right now. Just until Caleb really finds a consistent groove, I'm just not really going to trust any of them in my lineup. But I would probably lean more towards Najee just because I think, like I said earlier, I think all it takes is for him to get a touchdown and he has a solid week compared to what he has had his first 2 weeks. Steelers, I don't think, are going to struggle as bad as they have lately. Only one touchdown. I see that changing. If they score 2, I could see one of them go into Najee, so I'd go towards him.
All right. So that brings us to the other half. Just to refresh, we were talking Denver at Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay's favored by 6.5. We covered Denver's side of the ball, but on the Tampa Bay side of the ball, we all said to start Rachaad White and Chris Godwin. Both Mason and I said to start Mike Evans and Baker Mayfield, but Lee, you said to sit them. Very curious to hear about why you think QB1, MVP of the league from Mason Beck, it should be sat in week 3.
Well, for me, he's got to come down a bit. I think that's just going to be natural. The Denver defense has been good so far. Not great, and they struggled a little bit against Seattle. Obviously, we saw the big play from DK Metcalf, but it was really the run game where Seattle dictated. Kenneth Walker, Geno still only had 171, and that's with what was that? That was a I'm looking. That's not right. Okay, I'm mixing up the games because Seattle had New England this week, so I was looking at week 1. But then, last week again, I know it's Justin Fields, 117 yards is what they gave up passing, so they haven't given up a 200-yard passer. They haven't given up a big receiving game either. You look back against Seattle in week 1. Tyler Lockett did have 6 for 77. Nobody else went over 29 yards. Last week, Pat Freiermuth with 39 yards receiving. Again, I know it's Justin Fields. Patrick Surtain is the best cornerback in football, and I don't know that it's close right now. He doesn't get as many flowers because he's on a bad team, but Denver is susceptible to the run. We saw 141 yards total for Pittsburgh and 146 for Seattle in those 2 games. That's where they're going to get exploited. This is going to be a Rachaad White, Bucky Irving game, and that's also why I sit Mike Evans, because Patrick Surtain is going to shadow him. I think as Tyler Lockett showed in the first week, it's going to be that underneath stuff. That's where Chris Godwin, I don't mind starting him this week, especially with as much as he's worked from the slot and the attention he's got. But I look for Tampa to have a big comeback to the earth game. And again, as we kind of talked about in some of those other games, they've got Bo Nix, who has no arm. He's got a noodle arm. They've got no passing game. No rushing game. The Denver offense has been putrid. They're not going to have to score a lot of points. Clock control on the ground. They're going to grind this one out. Tampa's going to win, but it's going to be a down performance just by how poorly Denver's offense is going to play.
Yeah. I can see that argument with Mike Evans just because, who he's probably going to be matched up against Patrick Surtain. But my kind of thing with Baker is, you said Broncos defense is kind of better than it is. Yeah, the defense has been pretty good so far, but they've only played the Steelers and Seattle, who I don't think are really any offenses that are going to wow you away or anything like that. Bucks are hot. They just came off a big win against Detroit. I think that momentum, if it could carry into this next week, they're going to come out firing and just kind of destroy, Denver, especially being at home after a big win like that. That crowd's going to be fired up. Bucks are going to be rolling. I think they're just going to absolutely destroy them, and Baker's going to have at least a 270-yard game.
Yeah, and that was
There's a lot of
kind of
there's a lot of similarities with Seattle and Tampa. Not just that Canales over the last few years was there. Baker Mayfield is Geno Smith. Geno Smith is Baker Mayfield. They're the same person. They are very similar in my opinion. You know, that you have very good options at wide receiver. You have a better rushing game with Seattle, but I don't see a huge difference. And Tampa's going to continue to do well, but it's all about matchups. I do think they come back to earth. I don't think they're a top 2 or 3 team in the NFC as they've kind of looked like over 2 weeks. I know that the Detroit win, they blew out a bad Washington offense, but I don't think that offense is as good as it's looked. And I look for them to, like I said, lean on the run game.
All right, so this next game that we got coming up is Green Bay at Tennessee. Tennessee favored by 3. I think that's assuming that Jordan Love misses this one, and the spreads were added as of last night. If Jordan Love starts this game, though, where do you guys have him right now? I have him as a start. Lee, you have him as a start. Mason, you said that he would be a sit. Is that worry about the injury, or is that more so just don't believe that they're going to have success against Tennessee?
Well, one, I don't think he's going to play. So that's just kind of the first thing. The second thing is, even if he does play, he's their franchise guy. You know, they did win last week with Malik Willis. They're not going to – they just signed Jordan Love to this huge deal. They're not going to rush him out and, risk re-injuring their guy this early into the season. If he does play, they're gonna be very patient with him. They're not going to force him to, put up these big stats or anything like that. So even if he does play, I'm out on Love this week.
Okay. I think that if he starts, he's got to be played. There's too much wide receiver talent on this team. And Josh Jacobs, he is going to get a ton of carries right now. I also think that if Jordan Love plays, they're going to look at this as an opportunity to kind of spell Josh Jacobs. He's been given so much of a workload over the first 2 weeks. What was it, like 35 touches last week or something insane? So I think that Jordan Love can be relied on. The Tennessee defense doesn't scare me. They are solid. Last year, they were one of the top run defenses in the league, so I think it would force them to pass a little bit. And then the Green Bay defense has been pretty solid, but the Titans' running game has been going up against very difficult opponents, and they haven't stifled at all. They went up against the Bears in week 1. And then who was it in week 2? Let me see really quick.
Jets.
The Jets. So, yeah, 2 typical run games. In both games, Tony Pollard, at least 12 and a half PPR points and up to 16.9. They've been solid. I do think that Will Levis and the turnovers, they're going to hurt the Green Bay offense, which, could end up limiting Jordan Love. But that's the only way I really see it going poorly for Jordan Love if he is starting.
Yeah, I agree.
Word. Next one, we got a bunch of covers still, and we are 54 minutes through. We got the Giants.
Also, sorry. Start the Packers defense as a streaming defense. Go ahead.
I like that. So we got Giants at Cleveland for the next one. Most of the players in this one are going to be a sit. So the exceptions, we have Malik Neighbors as a clear start. Jerome Ford, we all have as a start. Amari Cooper, we have as a flex or a start. I was the only one to say Deonta Foreman could be a desperation flex. It's purely because he is now the RB2 on the depth chart with Pierre Strong going down. And I think that he is likely to end up with at least 1 touchdown. But the one player I thought was the most interesting of this, I have Devin Singletary as a sit. Mason has him as a flex. Lee has him as a start. I don't know. Who do you think has to give the explanation here on this one? We're all a bit split.
I mean, I'll go since I was the strongest on him. And to me, it's a volume thing. I mean, obviously he looked good against a bad Commanders, defense, but it's Neighbors and Singletary, and there's nobody else in this offense. I mean, I know Wandale's gotten quite a few targets. He got in the end zone last week, but it's Singletary. They got out of game script week 1 because they were so far behind the Vikings. This Browns offense is not going to do this to them. They're not going to do that. And if you have Daniel Jones as your quarterback, what should you do? You should run the ball. They're going to run the ball. He's going to get a lot of carries, a lot of touches, volume play.
I have Singletary at flex because, I mean, he's been decent the first 2 weeks, nothing crazy, nothing awful. I honestly think that just there's a lot more running backs that I would rather trust within the top 24. You might not have one on your team. So, say top 26, 27 running backs. So if you Singletary, there's probably that many that I'd rather start over Singletary. But if you got to start him, it's okay. Flex, I mean, it just there's not many. Daniel Jones still sucks. There's not many weapons on that team. They had a good week against the Commanders, or decent week against the Commanders because they're a terrible team. But just Singletary is going to get enough workload to really, whether or not it's scores, I just think it's enough workload where you're okay with him at the flex. It's just he's got a good floor. Just the ceiling is very limited.
Yeah. For me, it's just I think that the Browns defense could potentially outscore the Giants offense in this one. I think that the Browns are going to get to Daniel Jones frequently. I think that the Giants defense, even though they have a strong defensive line, I do think that we're going to be able to take advantage of the secondary at least enough to move the ball consistently, long drives, a lot of plays ran. Right now, the Giants' pass blocking numbers are being carried by Andrew Thomas, who is an incredible left tackle for them. But after that, for PFF gradings alone, just to give you a general summary, there's no offensive lineman ranked above 70.1 outside of Andrew Thomas. I just think that the Browns are going to hit home a lot. They did it against Jacksonville last week, and I think they're going to cause a few turnovers. I think the Giants maybe get to the red zone once. And if Singletary doesn't get a ton of receptions, then he's not really going to be worthwhile if he's not falling into that end zone either. All right, so that is going to wrap it up. We appreciate everybody. This is going to wrap it up, at least for the Atlanta broadcast here. Appreciate everybody joining in. Make sure you check out the YouTube page if you want the rest of the starts and sits for these games coming up in week 3. All right, so Chicago at Indianapolis is our next one. Did I skip anything? No, we're good. We're good there. So Chicago at Indy. Indy's favored by 2. Chicago's offense has looked putrid. Indianapolis had a strong week 1, not as strong of a week 2. Really, the concerns here are DJ Moore and Michael Pittman. Everybody else on the Bears we have as a sit, and Lee has DJ Moore as a sit. Me and Mason still have DJ Moore as a start. So Lee, talk about why you don't think DJ Moore is worth a start in week 3.
I just think there's better options. I'm not starting any Bears offensive player until further notice. Caleb Williams has not looked good. He's not looked comfortable. You expect, some growing pains as a rookie quarterback, but everybody said it, as far as being in the best situation possible for a number 1 pick, or the best situation ever. And through 2 games, and maybe I've missed something, I haven't seen any flashes. You expect the struggles, but you do expect some flashes of brilliance. You expect at least, something to give you hope. And so far, the game looks too fast for him. It looks like he played against some really soft Pac-12 defenses. And once he's came to the NFL, it's too fast. They can't give him any running game to support him. I do hope for Bears fans' sake and fantasy prospects for the rest of this team that he shows great improvement over the next 15 weeks. But right now, I've got to see it before I trust any of them. There's too many wide receivers that have hit. I'm out on all of them until further notice.
Where you drafted DJ Moore. I need one more week of just unproductivity for me to really be okay mentally with sitting him on my bench because, if you sit him and he goes off, you're going to just be regretting it the whole time.
Yeah, for me, I mean, Keenan Allen, he didn't practice today. He missed week 2. I think that DJ Moore is by far the most talented wide receiver on this team. And then when you factor in the fact that Odunze and Keenan Allen are at least hampered by injuries, DJ Moore, 18 targets through the first 2 weeks, 11 receptions, has only 89 yards to show for it. And that's kind of speaking to Caleb Williams' woes. Lee, you talked about it, but to put some numbers to it, Caleb Williams, 56.1% completion percentage. That is 6th lowest amongst 33 qualifying quarterbacks in the league for 2024. And then yards per attempt, this is why we're seeing DJ Moore at such a low yards per reception. His yards per attempt is 4.0 yards. That 4 yards on the dot. That is horrendous. By far the least in the league, and that's beating Bryce Young by about half a yard. Deshaun Watson by half a yard. Bo Nix by a full yard. That is so bad. I agree. I haven't seen the flashes. I think that he's trying to extend plays when maybe he shouldn't be extending them. Just take the easy option. And really, between that and what's his name? Shane Waldron, right? He took over as offensive coordinator this year, came from Seattle. We saw how that offense struggled after a very successful year 1 under Dave Canales. And I think that's going to continue. I just don't think he's a good offensive coordinator. So the one lone bright spot to me is DJ Moore. DJ Moore gets the targets, has the athleticism. I think maybe after talking about it some more, maybe I'll list him as a flex rather than a start. But either way, I do think he should be in your lineup. On the other side of the ball, we have any Colts tight end, Josh Downs, A.D. Mitchell, all listed as sits across the board. We all have Jonathan Taylor as a start, Anthony Richardson as a start. I do think he has a low floor, but one of the highest ceilings you'll see. Chicago's a tough defense, so it could be one of those low floor games. Still worth starting. Really, the player we want to talk about here is Michael Pittman Jr. We also had Alec Pierce listed as a sit for the most part. Mason did have him as a flex, but I want to talk about Michael Pittman Jr. here. Michael Pittman, atrocious start to the year. We've seen Anthony Richardson take shots downfield on the limited passing attempts that he has. That's not going to benefit Michael Pittman Jr. much. I do understand sitting him, Lee. It's just like, do you think that this is going to be a consistent thing moving forward, or is this more so like a matchup and what we've seen through the first 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, I think the matchup, obviously, we go back to those cornerbacks, Jalen Johnson, really, really solid cornerback, a guy who's emerged as a top guy. This is going to be a slugfest, and it's really the short to medium accuracy that is so concerning. It has been. That's been the knock on Anthony Richardson. Coming out of college, that's been the concern until I can see some better short and medium accuracy from him, because we know that's Michael Pittman's bread and butter. The man is allergic. He's allergic to the grass in the end zone, but he generally eats in between the 20s, and that's just not happening with this offense. It's boom or bust. It's all or nothing. It's a 60-yard pass or it's 3 and out and they're punting. The accuracy really concerns me. I'm curious, being that we're on this game, where you guys would go between DJ Moore and Michael Pittman if you had that decision.
DJ Moore for me, for sure.
Depends on the rest of my team. If I'm needing a big upside play.
All your teams suck, Mason, so the rest of your team sucks. Who are you choosing?
DJ Moore, because might as well try to get the more upside play. I think there's a lot more upside there. Like, Caleb's going to have a good week at some point. I'm not sure if it's this week, but It'll come.
I get the general argument for their play styles, and Pittman ordinarily would have, a higher baseline. But so far through 2 games, DJ Moore's had more targets, had more receptions, more yards than all of them. So I do think, especially with the injuries being factored in, that he has the higher baseline. But neither one of them are, make you happy to start right now. Been kind of the story of DJ Moore's career, which does suck. We always say, "Oh, this is the best quarterback he's going to play with," and never seems to quite come to fruition. Next game up, oof, Carolina at the Raiders. Raiders are favored
Oof.
by 5.5. Yeah, big oof there. Lee says sit everybody on the Panthers. I said, me and Mason said to flex Chuba Hubbard. Um, I do think that with Andy, a putrid offensive line, Andy Dalton being 30, what, 8 at this point, something like that. Let me
You might as well
check
be
that.
138.
Dude, right? It's wild. Yeah, so he's 36 years old, but the guy does not move, never moved, even when he was 23. So he's going to check down. Chuba Hubbard is primarily the pass catching back, at least the more efficient pass catching back. So I think it's worth flexing him. Um, Such a disappointing start for Deontay Johnson, man. I really thought that he would have some hope, and it seems no glimmer of hope so far through the first few. But I do think that one of Deontay Johnson or Adam Thielen will have a good game. If you're desperate and you need to flex one of them, I would go Adam Thielen because he has more touchdown upside than Deontay Johnson has.
I want
But
to add
that's
one more
yeah,
to that equation because it's a real life decision for me.
yep.
And not Thielen, but Deontay Johnson or Romeo Dobbs. Let's assume Jordan Love doesn't play.
Mm,
Deontay.
I'll go Deontay.
And if
If
Jordan Love
Love,
plays, you go Dobbs.
yes, yeah,
I agree.
exactly, yeah. Um, Dobbs has been out there consistently. He's got above an 80% snap share. He's involved in the offense and offers something that the other wide receivers don't have. Whereas Deontay Johnson is very similarly styled to Adam Thielen, just take off, 5 years. So that and then just the putrid offensive line. I feel bad for Bryce Young. He's looked horrendous. It
Didn't he
is
have the most time to pass or one of the better pockets? I saw some breakdown. I don't remember the exact stat, but supposedly he had a pretty decent pocket and time to pass in this most recent game, and still was bad. But I'm sorry, I can't
I'll
remember
look.
the exact stat.
I'll look. I mean, we're only 2 games in, so I'll look up how much time to pass the quarterbacks have had. Um, but Mason, touch on that while I'm looking that up.
Yeah, honestly, I'm still confident with starting Deontay at my, or I'm more confident starting Deontay at my flex this week. Um, just because Bryce Young's not the quarterback yet. It might not all be his fault, but I think there is a lot that is to blame on him. The Panthers are better than they were last year. Bryce Young does not look better at all than he is last year. Andy Dalton may not be a Hall of Famer by any means, but he's a seasoned vet who I think will at least do enough to get it done. And I believe the game he started last year, like week 4, something like that, Dalton looked pretty good. And I think it improves them both. Thielen, there's touchdown upside. Deontay, I think it's going to get a good amount of receptions. PPR leagues, I think he's definitely a flex spot there. Half PPR, a little more worried, but still okay with having him at my flex.
Just to touch on what you're talking about, Lee. So Bryce Young, 2.83 seconds from time to throw, according to PFF. That is the 14th most of quarterbacks, qualifying 33. So kind of middle of the pack on that. I looked up specifically the game from last week, and he had a quicker time to throw. I don't know if that's like the best I could do given on the spot. I don't know if that's exactly touching on what you're speaking about there. Um, Even if he's had time to throw, he doesn't look comfortable back there. He just looks like Sam Darnold from his first couple of years in the league. So I don't think that I think they're making the right move for their football team if they are actually trying to win games, but they should probably just throw Bryce Young back there and get that 101. Um, we'll see. We'll see how it moves, how it shakes out going forward. Outside of that, on the other side of the ball, we got Raiders, Minshew, Alexander Madison, Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker, all sit. Um, Lee has Zamir White listed as a sit. I have him listed as a start, Mason as a flex. That's the number one guy I wanted to talk about. For me, boiling it down, it's the matchup. Gonna play against Carolina. We talked about it before, but the Raiders have not really been in a positive game script. Negative game script for over a half against the Chargers. Chasing the Ravens, end up winning the game, but in a negative game script most of the game. Raiders right now have the most passing attempts per game, or I'm sorry, not the most pass, the highest passing play percentage in the league right now. I think that flips in a hard way, and they get back to what they want to be under Antonio Pierce, a running team that prides themselves on defense and running the ball. So I like Samir White.
I have him at flex. I mean, part of me is saying, distrust him completely, throw him on the bench. But I got him at flex because, like you're saying, game script is going to be different probably this week playing Carolina, which, who knows, it could be a little closer with Andy Dalton, but still, I do see the Raiders having a good lead, at least being ahead for most of it, at least a one possession lead, or at least having the momentum of feeling like they are ahead most of the game, running it a lot more. Both games, White has also got more carries, even week one when he got way less of a snap percentage than Madison. White's going to get it. White has also looked really inefficient, though, so that's kind of worrying. Neither running back has done anything on the ground. Like last week, Madison 4 carries, 1 yard. Zamir White 9 carries, 24 yards. Neither of them are averaging over 3 yards a carry. That does worry me, but hopefully this week's better just because of the matchup.
Yeah, obviously it's a pretty good matchup. I do think that the Panthers, just with everything that's happened, the quarterback change, I do think they're going to be energized. I expect them to be much more competitive this week, not just because Andy Dalton's in there, but if you have a team full of guys who don't think that they can win with the quarterback that's playing, it's human nature. It's going to affect you. They've heard all the laughter, the jeers. This is a team. They had a couple of, obviously we don't know exactly how good everybody is yet, but this feels like the best matchup so far for them. So we'll see. But I expect them to be much more competitive. And as Mason touched on, the inefficiency, 22 carries for 68 yards. He's had 1 carry of over 10 yards. That was a 12-yard run in week 1. You take that one away, obviously he had it, so you can't just take it away. But you remove that 1 carry, we're talking about 21 carries for 56 yards. He's only averaging 3.1 with the 12-yard carry. He's a plotter. He did thrive on volume. Maybe that shakes out this week. But there's a lot of other guys that I would rather play. I would absolutely smash Devin Singletary over Zamir White this week.
With the added passing upside for Devin Singletary, I would agree. I would probably start Singletary over Zamir White. And after poring over some of these stats right now, Las Vegas right now amongst the NFL teams, according to PFF, 44.1 run blocking grade, finishes second in the league, only behind the Denver Broncos. I know it's a young offensive line, so that's probably got a lot to do with it right there. Why they're hitting these quick hitting passing throws. Their pass blocking is a little bit much better. They are 13th best in the league compared to second worst in the league. So maybe it does go that way. Maybe they attack through the air. I am going to I'm going to move Zamir from a start to a flex right there. I did not know how atrocious their offensive line was. Just really quick, throw over under for both teams combined, 8 sacks on the day. We'll say 8.5.
I mean, I haven't really thought about it, but I expect Crosby to feed.
Right. Raiders line's gonna feed. Panthers have at least a couple playmakers there.
Do they? I mean, Derek Brown, their best player, is out, and I mean,
Oh, I honestly
na-
did not know Derek Brown was out.
yeah, name somebody else on that defense.
Yep. I mean, now that Brian Burns is gone,
J.C. Horn, maybe.
Yeah,
I mean,
Jason
right. He's the cornerback. He's not. He's not going to be making a lot of sacks there.
Corner blitz is
Is
coming
Yeah,
Lindley still there?
we'll see how it goes. All right. So next game up, we got this is another oof game. Miami at Seattle, and it's only a oof because Skylar Thompson is starting. Makes some of these start sit decisions much easier. We got Skylar Thompson, Raheem Mostert, Jalen Wright, Jeff Wilson, Jonnu Smith, all as sits. If Tyler Huntley does start, you definitely sit him. Only guy who's ever had success with that little practice time is Joshua Dobbs. Geno Smith, Zach Charbonnet, Tyler Lockett, Noah Fant, also all listed as sits. So really on the Miami side of the ball, that leaves us with Devon Achane as a start. Tyreek Hill, obvious start, never sitting him. And Jalen Waddle was the most split we were. Mason still has him listed as a start, Mason or Lee as a sit, and then I have him in between as the flex. I listed low ceiling and floor. But that speed kills. You could always break one off. So Mason, this time I'm sending it your way first. Why do you have Jalen Waddle listed as a start with Skylar Thompson under center?
Hold up. Send it to Lee first. I gotta pull up my notes on this one.
Yeah. So Skylar Thompson.
That's why I didn't
Yeah.
send it to you first. It's like,
Skylar Thompson.
the arguments are clear.
I'm scared to death. You have to start Tyreek because of his explosiveness, because of where you drafted him. You have to start Tyreek. I am scared as hell starting him. And not, I mean, if Tyreek Hill, arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL, gives you 10 points or more this week, you're feeling pretty good. And normally a 10, 11, 12-point game from Tyreek is horrible, but you're hoping he takes a little bubble screen and goes 70 yards to the house. Jalen Waddle relies much more on volume. He does a lot of the underneath stuff, and he's got to get a lot of catches generally for him to be – he can take it to the house, don't get me wrong. He did have a 63-yard catch against Jacksonville, but it just – you're betting on that's really – he's not going to get the volume of targets that Tyreek gets, and you're really betting on him taking one to the house. You look at last week where I know Tua went out, but that's a game they were behind. Game script says you have to throw, and they were behind as soon as James Cook exploded, and 4 catches for 41 yards. I'm scared to death of anybody. I'm scared of Achane because you're going to stack the box, and I'm putting 8, 9 guys in the box and daring Skylar Thompson to do anything. I've got a real life question around this one, guys. So we've already covered Jordan Addison. So Jalen Waddle, Jordan Addison, or Xavier Worthy. Who are you starting out of those 3?
Xavier Worthy.
Probably
with Pacheco's injury, I just think that he's going to get more involved with the gadget plays. Some of those like little quick passes that they do out of shotgun. Maybe a couple of jet sweeps. What may it be? I think Worthy gets more involved.
Yeah. So,
just really quick, out of curiosity, Lee, before you asked us, where were you leaning on that one?
Right now, I have Jordan Addison in.
Okay.
I'm still scared of that because of the injury.
I was gonna say that's interesting because you had Addison as a sit. Didn't
I also have Waddle and Worthy as sits.
Well, there you go. Sorry, Mason. What were you saying?
I was saying how why I chose to start Waddle.
Yeah.
Honestly, just because in 2022, I believe it was when Skylar Thompson had to play. Yeah, that was when Tua was injured. There's a lot of connections. Waddle still did all right for the most part. There was one game where Thompson did get the whole start where Waddle didn't do the best. they have played together before. I don't see it being worse. This Miami team is a lot better just in general than it was then. Um, you know, don't think it's going to be big numbers or anything like that. I still think there's some touchdown potential, and Miami's going to do enough to get the end zone close enough. Tyreek Hill, I also think there's going to be a lot of pressure on him. Double coverage, because this team knows you have some quarterback that the team doesn't necessarily completely trust. Double coverage, take away their top weapon. They don't have a ton, and so Waddle could have a good day because of that reason. Just stop Tyreek Hill, so you're going to stop the Dolphins, and it's going to give Waddle some opportunity.
Yeah. The one other thing that scares me a little bit about this matchup, A, having Skylar Thompson, but B, the Seahawks do have young, athletic cornerbacks. They may make a couple of mistakes here or there. I don't think Skylar Thompson is going to be the guy that capitalizes on those mistakes. So that's where I stand on that game. The one other thing just worth mentioning at least. Hold on, we didn't touch the Seattle side of the ball. We got Gino as a sit. Oh no, did we? We did do that. We didn't hit the starts though. Jackson Smith and Jigba. Me and Mason have him as a flex, Lee as a start. I don't think we need to talk about it too much since we all have him in the lineup. Very impressive last week. So happy to finally see that from a guy that has had all the talent, but just hasn't been given the opportunity. Really breaks out in that role. So let's move on to the next one, though. We got Baltimore. Yeah, Baltimore heading to Dallas. Dallas is the underdog by 1 point. We all agreed for the most part on the Baltimore side of the ball. We are starting Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews. We are sitting Isaiah Likely, Rashad Bateman, and I have Justice Hill listed as a low upside flex, low upside capitalized. He does not need to be started unless you are truly desperate. But I do think that he's been seeing consistent mix into the passing game. He's been roughly splitting the snaps with Derrick Henry, and if if it ends up being more of a shootout, I think Justice Hill will have value. Just don't expect anything above 15 points unless he gets a lucky touchdown there. Dak Prescott, this was our biggest disagreement on this one. Both Lee and I have Dak as a start, Mason as a sit. Mason, why not worth a start versus the Ravens here?
No, that was a mistake. I didn't mean to do that.
Oh,
I did not mean to put sit.
well.
Yeah,
My bad for putting you on the spot then.
that
So
was a
for the most
mistake
part, we
by
all
me.
agree on this one, right? I sorry, Mason. What up?
Yeah, that was a mistake by me. I put in sit. I just looked at it and said, "Oh, crap." Yeah,
That's
no, I
fine.
would start that.
Right. Top 12 quarterback for sure. Um, we agree on pretty much this whole game for the most part. The one thing, Mason, you had Ezekiel Elliott as a flex. I said prefer to sit. Lee said for sure sit. Looks like in games that they are down, they might lean on Rico Dowdle a little bit more, according to last week. Um, but Zeke's still going to be the guy that gets the goal line work, gets enough of the passing game work to give him a little bit of a baseline. Is that kind of what you're seeing in this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just going to be enough to where like it is more desperation flex. It's like if you need someone, I'm not. He's kind of the guy that you can go to and you can be okay with, but there's a lot of better options for sure.
Yeah, no, I feel that. And then just worth mentioning, especially if you're in a dynasty league, Tolbert probably is rostered in most of these, but if he's out there, go and pick him up. Looks like he could be the wide receiver 3 and lean down a little bit more when they are down. Um, Next one, honestly, also a boring one, just for the sake of disagreement. Uh, Detroit, we all have listed every player that is worth a damn. We're starting Jared Goff, Jameer Gibbs, David Montgomery, Monroe St. Brown, Sam Laporta, Jameson Williams. I mean, Mason, you have him listed as a flex, but again, he's in your starting lineup. We've seen the upside. We've known it's been there, and now he's finally got the trust of the coaching staff to get the snaps, turn those snaps on the field into some production. So pretty much set on that one. Kyler on the other side of the ball, we're all starting Kyler, James Conner, Marvin Harrison Jr., Trey McBride, all sitting Greg Dortch, Michael Wilson, and Trey Benson. I do think Trey Benson could get more involved as we continue to go down. One quick question I have on this, since we agreed on so much, got to ask one question here. Over under currently sits on DraftKings at 51.5 points. Which side are you taking? Are you going over or under here?
Over, and I always love the unders. That's a high number in the NFL, but the Lions' offense is going to be better than what they've showed. The Cardinals' offense looks pretty dynamic. I look for a pretty high-scoring game, and I look for the Lions to get back on track. Jared Goff's finally going to have a good game. He's going to be a top 16 quarterback, but I look for a lot of points. Thank God Marvin Harrison Jr. got involved last week. So
man,
we were all holding our breath.
Again, Marv, like whoever it was, Kyler, Marv, don't do that to us again.
Right, exactly. And Trey McBride's tight end one, and maybe tight end one dynasty, definitely tight end one in redraft. But Trey McBride over Sam Laporta or Brock Bowers right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, the more impressive college career too. Just to say real quick, Mason.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think this is going to be a high-scoring game. So there's just going to be a ton of offense. The Lions coming off last week's loss, I think they're going to be pretty fired up. You know how Dan Campbell rolls, going to get that team ready to rock and roll. Come back fighting. And I mean, just Arizona, entertaining team. Kyler, you never know what he's going to do. I think it's going to be one of the more entertaining games of the weekend. Start as many players on Detroit as you pretty much can. Cardinals, Kyler, James Conner, Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison. I think they're all pretty much going to be solid plays. Obviously, one or two of them won't work out, but I think most of those guys are going to be very solid producers this week.
Yeah, and I agree it's going to be one of the most fun games to watch, and it's going to be through different styles. Detroit's going to win the battle in the trenches on both sides. They're going to run the ball well. Jared Goff, statuesque quarterback, has the fourth lowest time to throw, from snap to throw. And then Kyler Murray, 33 qualifying quarterbacks. Kyler Murray has the second most time to throw, just creating time, winning through the passing game, just extending plays. And Detroit does have a vulnerable secondary in comparison to their run stopping ability. So I really do like Kyler in this one. I like Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride. I think James Conner is absolutely still a start. However, I would limit expectations for him specifically. Moving on, we got San Francisco heading to the Los Angeles Rams. This is going to be a get-right game if I've ever seen one. The primary threat for the Rams are their wide receivers, and their two-star wide receivers are out and out for a while. So filling in for them is Demarcus Robinson, Tyler Johnson, Tutu Atwell. Of the three, who are you starting, if any of them?
Demarcus Robinson. And I think that's an easy one. I think Tyler Johnson's startable as well, depending on your situation. But I think this is a little bit bold, but I would start Demarcus Robinson this week over DJ Moore.
That is bold. So what was the other wide receiver we were talking about in the same realm as DJ Moore? I think it was in the same game. I'm sorry. Michael Pittman. So I would start Demarcus Robinson over Michael Pittman because Michael Pittman needs the volume. Great volume wide receiver, does great work when you're, on these timed routes, quick hitting, let's move the ball, Gardner Minshew style. Big worry heading into this offseason. Like, I am a Anthony Richardson and Michael Pittman dynasty owner. I love the stack opportunity. I thought that maybe there'd be a little bit more passing volume than there is in this offense. So I did not move on, and I regret it after Michael Pittman having a great year last year. Should have sold high. Should have sold high. Even if he does return to form a little bit, I don't think his value in Dynasty would get higher than it was this last offseason. That being said, I agree with your Demarcus Robinson take. I don't agree with your Tyler Johnson take. Mason, where do you sit on this for these three wide receivers?
Yeah, I don't agree with Tyler Johnson at all. Demarcus Robinson, he's gotten it done. He's had a couple games in the past with the Rams before, just randomly in these seasons where he's shown that he can produce with Stafford. I like him a lot just because there's no one else to really throw to. It's going to be a tough game though for the Rams. I don't think there's going to be a ton of offensive production in general. I think it's going to be a lot more run based. But the few big plays that they do get off are going to be designed for Demarcus Robinson.
Yeah.
I've got to go ahead.
The one thing I want to say is I do think that Tutu Atwell is a sleeper amongst this bunch. The Rams for the last few years have been first in the league in terms of pre-snap motion. You're not putting Demarcus Robinson into pre-snap motion. 29 years old, 6'1", 202. Jordan Whittington, looking at it now, is the same exact height and weight. He's not known for blazing speed. I feel like you need one of those quick twitch guys that can keep on moving. And I think Tutu Atwell is the guy that has experience in this offense and is unlike the other types of wide receivers. So I do think that he is sneaky, and even though he has not had the snap percentage in comparison to the other three or four we're talking about today, I do think that he could be valuable in an NFL standpoint and actually end up being at least the second most valuable wide receiver to roster while Kupp and Nakua are out.
I was just going to say, and this is just a gut feeling. I know they're decimated by injuries on the offensive line. We've lost our best two receivers. And generally speaking, Sean McVay has struggled against Kyle Shanahan. But you've got the 49ers as a more than touchdown favorite on the road in Los Angeles. I'm taking the money line and the Rams to win outright because this is the NFL. The Rams are a desperate team, and Mason's going to be very sad after this Sunday.
I was this is a whole bunch of smack to talk with Mason right here. What do you, Mason?
Rebuttal. I just want to say, just because it is a division game, Rams-Niners games are always intense. What the odds are taking the Rams money line is not a terrible bet just because of how these games always turn out. The Niners have been struggling. I think Niners are going to cover the spread, but it's how these division games go. Kyle Shanahan usually does own McVay in the regular season, but
what a humble Mason back we have before us. I mean, who do you hate more than the Seahawks? Other than the Rams, who do you hate more? Seahawks and nobody else?
Well, Seahawks are the number one hated team, right? It's the Seahawks you hate the most.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Seahawks are number one.
I hate Seahawks a lot more than I hate the Rams.
Right, but who's number two?
The Cowboys.
Browns fan, I'm not giving anything.
No, honestly,
the Eagles. The Eagles.
No, my probably number two would be the Chiefs, and not just because Chiefs are great, because they've beat us twice in the Super Bowl. So
that's fair. That's fair, and the recent hurts more.
Yeah.
All right, so we got a comment coming in from Camden Christensen. Got Shroud, Gibbs, Ramondre Stevenson, Travis Etienne, Jamar Chase, Nico Collins. This is a nice lineup so far, may I say. Jalen Waddle, Trey McBride. Would you trade Ramondre for Derrick Henry or James Conner? I would not personally right now. I like Ramondre as far as his youth and his lack of injury history. And Derrick Henry, although he does not have a big injury history, he is seeing half of the snap percentage anytime they're in a game where they're losing. Justice Hill is taking the passing down work. I like Ramondre Stevenson to at least mix into the passing game work. And then James Conner is just like he hasn't played a full season ever. So I'm gonna lean Ramondre here.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'd stick with Ramondre. Henry just hasn't impressed me at all. And then, like you said, Connor's just injury risk. Trey Benson also probably will start working in a little bit more at some point.
It does feel crazy to say that though. Ramondre over Derrick Henry feels weird out of my mouth.
It does.
I would keep Ramondre over Henry. I think I would trade him for Connor, and I think you could probably get a little something extra there. But my main reasoning is obviously Connor, the injury, he's going to miss a couple of games. I would hope. I mean, you have Gibbs as well there, so you have some wiggle room. But I think Connor being on a much better offense, he's going to have a much more opportunity as far as scoring touchdowns. And I do see Gibson has gotten more work than Benson at this point. Benson hasn't looked great, so maybe he gets better as the season goes on. But to me, especially, I mean, you're trying to win a championship. You're not trying to finish second place. I think now is a good time to sell high on Ramondre Stevenson. It's still a really bad offense. I tend to think the Patriots come back to earth a bit, and I think I love the Cardinals' offense. I mean, having him and McBride, you are pretty heavy on the Cardinals, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I will say the touchdown upside lies with Derrick Henry. Something tells me to keep Ramondre, especially if you're in a PPR, because Henry doesn't get the targets. Man, after saying, I was like, Ramondre over Derrick Henry feels wrong out of the mouth, and now I'm just second guessing it just the littlest bit there because Henry could have these games that win you weeks, whereas the Patriots offense is not going to have many games where they score more than 3 touchdowns this season, whereas Derrick Henry could have 3 touchdown games himself on this offense. Man, that is close between Ramondre and Derrick Henry. If the Ravens defense was what it used to be, then I would easily say Derrick Henry, but they've lost some players. They aren't what they used to be.
It's not the defense that worries me; it's their offensive line. That's why I'm on top of Henry's age, and I've been a valid, anti-Henry this year. It's just the offensive line has struggled, and yeah, I mean they're going to have to rely on Lamar and his legs and throwing the ball more.
And I agree with you. The offensive line has also taken a dip down, and that I feel like those two things, defense and running the ball, run blocking, has been their their main stage, whatever the fuck you want to say. But I'm realizing we have more games to talk about, boys. We are just hitting the not Sunday night game. We got 3 more games to talk about with 2 Monday night games this week. Sunday night football, though, we got the Chiefs heading to Atlanta. Chiefs are favored by 4.5. A lot of question marks on the Chiefs right now, especially with that running back room. Right now, just cover the starts, clear starts, Patrick Mahomes, Rashee Rice, Travis Kelce, even with the early season woes for Travis Kelce. Other side of the ball, Bijan, workhorse, Drake London, still a start for all of us. I think that encouraging signs, but still a lot to be hoped for there. And that's all for the clear starts. Big question mark of the week, Carson Steele, Samaje Perine. Kareem Hunt is signed to the squad. There are 3 running backs that are going to be fighting for opportunities for the next 3 weeks, 6 weeks. The next 6 weeks while Isaiah Pacheco misses time. I feel like everyone's big question. People are making huge fab bids on Carson Steele, all of the 3. So where do you guys lie? Who do you think is going to be the most valuable for the most 6 weeks bare minimum while Pacheco is out?
If we're talking the full 6 weeks, 6 to 8 that Pacheco's out, I'm gonna say Kareem Hunt. I think it's going to take him a week though to really get going with this offense. But if we're talking this week, any of them, I have the most faith in Carson Steele. I would flex him if anything. Not super confident in it though. Uh, but I do see Kareem in a week or two really seeing a good role. And if he does a good job with the opportunities given, it hurts Pacheco even when he's back because I think it could give Kareem Hunt a more permanent role into this offense.
Lee?
Yeah, I vehemently disagree. Vehemently. Kareem Hunt was let's look it up. 3 yards a carry last year. He's been on the street. He's been doing DoorDash, staying busy. There's a reason why he was on the street. There's a reason why he didn't get signed anywhere. He is a depth piece. The only person he's going to take away from at this point in his career is Carson Steele. They may split goal line carries, which is valuable, and that's your most valuable work. Samaje Perine will be the pass catching back. They are going to revert more to a passing offense, short passes to move the ball. They're not going to be a heavy run team like they were with Pacheco. You've got Patrick Mahomes back there. Give me all the Samaje Perine. This is a guy who is a solid NFL running back. He's a professional running back. He had 4.5 yards of carry last year in very limited time. Still had 50 receptions for a horrible Broncos offense. But he was 4.5 yards of carry when he ran the ball. He's going to be the guy in between the 20s. But most importantly, the only thing you can count on out of any of these guys is the pass catching. He is going to eat on the pass catching work. I like Samaje Perine to really – I'd start him this week. I'm scared of Alligator Man. We'll see what he can do. He's a fullback. He's got a little bit of pop, but he's to be determined. When he stepped up in college, he had good numbers when he was at a secondary school. But when he stepped up, I think it was UCLA, very pedestrian. So we'll see what he can do. Perine is the only one who still has a little bit of juice, and I love Perine. He's the one I dumped my fab on.
I began the week also thinking Perine because I agree that he's going to be the primary pass catcher by a long shot. Right now, the only action he's seen on the field, the only opportunities are through the passing game, whereas Carson Steele has only gotten opportunities through the run game. Kareem Hunt last year, yes, super inefficient for sure. He was only limited to a short yardage role, though. It was like third and shorts, goal line work. So that's going to factor in kind of like a Zeke has the past few years as well. I do think Kareem will take more away from Carson Steele than he will from Samaje Perine, making Perine the safer bet. And you can also get him for less fab right now. However, I do think Carson Steele is going for more fab because he is the highest upside play. Kareem Hunt, yes, even though in a limited role last year, is now an older, less explosive player. Samaje Perine, the same. Carson Steele, a rookie, young guy, 21 years old. He has the most physical ability to make the most of this opportunity. And that's why he's going for the most. I really would love if we were able to run our show before waivers ran and talk about this, to impact this a little bit more for everybody else. They've already ran, so I'm sure people have seen all three of these guys go for pretty obscene prices across the board. But I would put my faith in Samaje Perine. If you need a flex, if you need a baseline, you needed somebody to replace one of the many running backs that went out. I'm going Samaje Perine. They're going to replace the run game with short, quick passing plays. And Samaje is going to see his snap percentage jump from the mid-teens to, I think, 40% or so. And then the rest will be split between Carson Steele and Kareem Hunt after this week. Kareem's probably not going to see much this week.
And I hear you. One other thing to add is I hear you on the Kareem Hunt a lot was short yardage. Jerome Ford we like, but he's not this all-world back. And, I mean, he's more of a pass-catching back anyway.
Right.
He's not this all-world back, and Cream really couldn't carve out much of a role beyond the goal line last year. 3.3 yards per touch is what Cream Hunt averaged last year in a really bad Broncos offense. Samaje Perine averaged 8.1 yards per touch, the best of his career. He's only 29 now. I really like him. I like this. I hate it for anybody on Pacheco. Luckily, I didn't have much of him. But I really like this for Travis Kelce to get right. And Xavier Worthy is going to have a much expanded role as well.
Agreed. Agreed with that for sure. All right. On the other side of the ball, encouraging signs from the Falcons in that last drive coming back, winning the game, but they had to a tough Chiefs defense. Kirk Cousins, I have listed as a sit. Mason has listed as a sit. Lee, you got him as a start. Interested to hear what you have to say about it.
So I would start Kirk Cousins over Baker Mayfield this week. So we'll put that out there to start with.
That's crazy.
I've got a few bold takes this week. They unlock something. When you come back, as we all know, anybody that's played sports or you're a big sports fan, confidence is one of the most important things out there. You have to believe. Kirk Cousins did not look like a confident quarterback week one against Pittsburgh. Part of that was TJ Watt was pretty much hitting him on his third or fifth step. He was there every time. It's a different Chiefs defense. They do get pressure in the interior, but Chris Jones isn't going to be there as quick as TJ Watt was. But that drive, best he's looked all season, and I heard it on the Manning cast. They were talking about it and you're learning a new offense. You're coming back from injury. This is where you can really gain confidence because you're going to your go-to plays. You're acting quick. You're not thinking a lot. That kind of win, and we know Cousins hasn't been great in prime time. To go to just throw boom, 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 four or five passes right down the field, touchdown within a minute, just that boosts his confidence so much that I really look for us to see more of last year's Kirk Cousins in this game. Also, the Chiefs have a really good run defense. They don't have as good a pass defense as they've had. We know they lost L'Jarius Sneed. We know the Chiefs, even without a starting running back, are going to score points. They're not going to be able to rely on just running Bijan in this game. They're going to have to throw to keep up. I love the Falcons in this game. I don't expect them to win, but I do think they're going to keep it very competitive. I look for Drake London to continue what he showed, kind of towards the end of that game, that fourth quarter, especially the big pass. That if you're listening, Tyler, you're probably not. I beat our CEO on that last touchdown pass. Went from 0-2 to 2-0 on the week. We got median scoring, but yeah, that's neither here nor there. Kyle Pitts as well. They're going to throw the ball a lot, and they're just not going to be able to run the ball against a very stout Chiefs defensive front. Look for Kirk Cousins, not top 12. Look for Kirk Cousins to be a top 8 quarterback this week.
Very bold. Very bold. That's a DFS play if I've ever heard one. Mason, talk about the other side. What are you seeing here with Kirk Cousins going up against the Chiefs?
I mean, I see more just like I put sit, but I see more as like a streaming option. The thing that does give me upside is that, it is against Kansas City, a lot of passing, but it's hard to score against Kansas City sometimes. And yeah, their passing defense isn't as good as, well, at least from what we've seen, it isn't as good as it has been in the past. But still, Kansas City's typically always a hard team to score against. There's not going to be a ton of touchdown opportunities, I think, for Cousins. They could give him a run for the money, but I just don't. I think it's going to be a low-scoring kind of game if the Falcons want to keep it close.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that there hasn't been enough shown through the passing game. I think they're more likely to get it done in the run game. Bijan's a talent, and right now, that the Chiefs are going to be a little bit more susceptible without being able to rely on such a steady run game offensively. So I don't know if they control the clock like they normally do. Maybe there's a couple of forced throws. The Atlanta secondary has not played great so far. But they do have talent back there. There's not a ton of passing options in the wide receiver core after Rashee Rice. Xavier Worthy's a talent, but he's young. He hasn't proven himself yet. We don't know how much he's going to be relied on in the offense. And I think AJ Terrell is talented enough to lock up Rashee Rice if need be. Um, hasn't played great so far, but we'll see how it comes. I do think that the only other question we have is Kyle Pitts. We talked about Xavier Worthy a lot throughout the show, so I'm gonna skip over him. But right now, Kyle Pitts, I think, is the biggest other question mark. Mason, for your start or sit, you have listed. So I was just curious to hear more about that.
I mean, like, I don't know. That's
I
how I
get it,
feel about
but
if I have to start him. It's just like, well, here we
here we
go.
go again.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of that's how you feel with Kyle Pitts. You know,
Right?
it's hard to not start him when he's on your lineup because you want him to do good so bad. And then the one
Yeah.
week he does do good, if you do sit him, it's gonna hurt you for the whole season. So it just I don't know. If you have a better option, there is, but I don't know. I mean, he's kind of like the 12 best tight end as far as who I'd start right now. Maybe
I totally get what you're saying.
I
Like
don't
what
really
I
know.
put was low end start, which emoted is and then on top of it, like I've traded him away on teams that I was competing in for dynasty leagues. It was a tight end premium. I traded him away straight up for Evan Ingram. Chance to go get a title that season. In teams where I'm rebuilding, I've traded away solid tight ends for Kyle Pitts. Like I have enough belief in the talent, but it never fucking works, and it's infuriating. So, but Lee, you got him as a straight up start. Is it just because of the tight end landscape?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just so much ceiling with him, and I know we haven't seen a ton of it, but again, it kind of plays back to my Kirk Cousins thought. I think we really see him return to form from last year. Obviously, he's another week removed. The confidence after Monday Night Football beating the Eagles. I'm changing one here. I did not have Darnell Mooney. Trent McDuffie's a good corner. Question mark on the other side. So maybe Drake London doesn't have quite as big a game. Darnell Mooney is going to catch at least one big pass, 50 plus yards. I like all the pass catchers. And I haven't done my pool picks this week. I'm going to say second upset of the week, Atlanta.
Nah.
Not just
Say
covers,
say
they're
it
going to
right
beat
now.
the
You
Chiefs.
say it. What'd you say?
I was thinking about going cover. It's 4.5 points for the Chiefs. Atlanta wins outright.
Wow. We got to write some of these bold takes
Right
down,
now.
man.
Rams
Yeah,
and Falcons both win this week.
all right, I'm writing at the bottom of the show, Doc. Rams and Falcons both win.
It's not happening.
I put it in quotes with a dash and Lee Cook, so it sounds
I mean,
like
I
a
would
forever
like Kansas
quote.
City to lose, but
You're gonna
it's
clip
not
this
going to happen.
years later. No. So I'm sorry. What'd you say, Mason?
I said I would like Kansas City to lose, but it's not going to happen.
Okay.
We're not going almost upset here. We're going upset times 2.
Right. I mean, yeah, I won't even talk about that. But so up next we got the Monday Night Football games. Last 2 games, boys. We can make it. Jacksonville against Buffalo. Buffalo is favored by 5.5. Just slapped the shit out of the Dolphins. Um, feel bad for Tua. That was a very unfortunate injury. Really hope for him for the best. But yeah, Skylar Thompson moving forward there. For the Jaguars, though, we got Trevor Lawrence is the biggest disagreement. Trevor Lawrence is a desperation start, in my opinion. Mason has him listed as a start, Lee as a straight up sit. So we're all kind of split there. What do you guys think? Trevor Lawrence.
Trevor Lawrence, I just kind of have him as a start because I don't know. He hasn't looked great so far. A lot of new pieces going in. They changed up that offense. Christian Kirk hasn't really looked anything special. It's just been a very interesting start for this this offense 100%, especially for Lawrence. But I think Buffalo, it's going to be especially on a primetime game. Well, is that even considered primetime since it's like the earlier Monday game?
Yeah, it's 7:30, I believe.
8 o'clock is prime time, so most of the game is going to be in prime time.
Yeah, so primetime
Right.
stuff. It's going to be
Yeah, you're West
helpful.
Coast, so it's like what, 4:30 for y'all?
Yeah, it's a 4:30 game for me.
Hippie.
But I think that just like that it's one of those games that even though Buffalo's slowed down opposing quarterback fantasy points so far, I still think that it's one of those games that's going to be should be a fun one to watch.
Right, two talented quarterbacks slinging it. Lee, what are you thinking here?
I think Doug Peterson's going to get fired.
I think
By the end of this season, I think he's out.
I wasn't
Shad
thinking of
Khan,
him as a hot seat coach, but he is. You're
he
right.
is. And I
Yeah.
mean, Shad Khan is not a particularly patient guy. I mean, he went through the Urban Meyer, just train wreck, and Doug Peterson did steady the ship. But this team is just languishing now. Trevor Lawrence should be better, but we've been saying that his entire career outside of like a 6-game stretch. I think Buffalo's defense is better than what people think. Even though they lost some pieces, they looked really good. Even before Tua went out, they looked really good against that Miami offense, which we know to be supposed to be one of the high-powered offenses. I think that they romp Jacksonville. I think Buffalo blows them out of the water, and there's going to be more questions after this game than there was, the previous week. I'm nervous, man. I mean, Brian Thomas, I do like and think he's really, of the rookie wide receivers outside of the top two, has really made himself the third. But I'm nervous for the entire Jacksonville offense. Each game you have to start, but I think this could get ugly quick, just like the Miami game. I take Kirk Cousins over Trevor Lawrence. Put that out there too.
I would take Kirk Cousins over Trevor Lawrence. I think the spike that you were talking about, I do think it was longer than 6 weeks, but it was just the fact that he had Urban Meyer as his coach for his first year in the NFL. Like, probably the worst 1-year display of head coaching that we've seen. And Doug Peterson is a step up from that. But I agree, he's in the hot seat right now. There's no way he can go with another season with the talent that they've surrounded it with him with offensively. As a offensive minded head coach, he's got to be able to make more of that. First overall quarterback, multiple first round picks on the team. So I do think that right now I'm sitting Trevor Lawrence. I think he's only a desperation start. After that, Etienne's just too much volume to sit. Tank Bigsby also got injured, so he's going to have more of a guaranteed role. Gabe Davis, surprisingly, the wide receiver 1 right now. What the fuck's happening with that? No one called Gabe Davis as the wide receiver 1 of this trio. Right now, he is the most startable asset on the team. Still has some promise to take one deep. Brian Thomas has the same opportunity, or not same opportunity. He has the same skill set, but less opportunity. I think overall, Brian Thomas will overtake Gabe Davis. But until then, I'm starting Gabe Davis over Brian Thomas. Lee, you got it the other way around.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think as we've seen kind of throughout his career, Gabe Davis is just, he's so hit or miss. I think especially now with Christian Kirk, who the hell knows what's happening with Christian Kirk?
He's doing nothing. What the fuck's happened to Christian Kirk?
I thought he had a connection. He supposedly had a connection. We were both pretty high on him.
I agree.
He's shit the bed. And these have been game scripts where you would think he would be involved. You know, they were ahead in Miami. Last week was a close
Negative 1
game.
yard. Negative
What
1
the
yard
hell?
against Cleveland. What's
Brian
happening?
Thomas looks like clearly the best wide receiver on that team after 2 weeks. You have to feed him the ball. You have to get him more involved. A lot of times rookies start slow. I mean, he had 2 catches for 96 yards last week, so that was impressive. And I think he's adapting to the NFL game quickly. I do like Brian Thomas a lot this week and going forward. I think it may be a while before Roma Dunze can challenge him as a third best receiver from this class.
Yeah, it's sad. It's such a talented wide receiver core or wide receiver draft class, and I feel like only really Malik Neighbors and now Marvin Harrison in week 2 have been really showing, and we know they're elite options. Hopefully Brian Thomas gets more opportunity, overtakes Gabe Davis. He has the talent too.
I think
Um,
Brian Thomas has looked good enough though for a rookie where I'm like, all right, like I think my stock on him's gone up a little bit.
I mean, yeah, I had McConkey over Brian Thomas as a bold take in our draft class. I thought that there would be a little bit more passing volume in the Charger offense, and maybe things average out a little bit here. But I would agree right now, retrospectively, I would definitely put Brian Thomas Jr. over Lad McConkey. Not any. I still believe in Romo Doomsday too much long term to put Brian Thomas Jr. over him, but we'll see. All right, so other side of the ball, obviously Josh Allen, James Cook, and still Dalton Kincaid looked a little bit more involved, especially in the first half of the game last week. All 3 starts. We have Keon Coleman as the big question mark, and Keon Coleman is listed as a sit for both me and Mason, but Lee has him as a start. I believe he gave us a goose egg last week.
He did, I believe.
Yeah, goose egg, 1 target, had 91% of snaps, 1 target, no receptions. They blew Miami out pretty quickly. So I get that side of the argument. But even before that, in a very close game against Arizona, 5 targets, 4 receptions, 51 yards. As a believer in Curtis Samuel as well, probably getting closer to healthy. Lee, what do you think? Why is Keon Coleman to start?
I still believe, like I love the week 1 performance, and obviously it was a close game. They needed it. It was only 4 catches on 5 targets, 51 yards. But he's a guy who I think as the season progresses, he's one of those rookies we're really going to see just, improve by multitudes week over week. I think he will be. Shakir is the target leader right now, and that's why I have him. He's going to be a lot of the underneath stuff, but I see Keon Coleman really being that deep threat. I see them opening up the offense a little bit more, and this is going to be, and this is again just feeling, but Keon Coleman's going to get his first NFL touchdown this week. They go have 60 plus yards. I just have a feeling he's really going to have a nice bounce back week. They're going to look to continue to integrate him into the offense, and he will be. I had hoped for Curtis Samuel and maybe some of the gadget plays and the short stuff. I think he probably takes more away from Shakir than he does Keon Coleman. I think Coleman is really going to be that guy midway through the season, and I think he's a guy that was dropped in a lot of leagues, and I've been scooping him up. I believe I said it was an odd game in Miami. It was a James Cook centric game where he just dominated. Nobody else really, even Josh Allen did not have a good game. I look for him to have a really bounce back performance on the back of Keon Coleman.
I will say that's very fair. Really quickly, just James Cook's gigantic chunk plays, 3 touchdowns, that ends drives quickly. And when you're up that much and your drive was ended because of an insane running play, that is going to cap your week to week upside. I do agree with that point, at least. Still not a believer on Keon Coleman. Mason, did you have anything to add to our hold on. Yeah, we're both saying sit here. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, Shakir's the only one I'm really trusting to kind of put in my lineup for now. Coleman, like there is a dynasty league I'm in where I am starting him. Dynasty obviously different than redraft. Your lineup is usually built a little different. But I'm not trusting him. It's just putting up a goose egg is for a rookie, who looked all right week one. Showed promise for week one in a rookie debut. But just not getting anything. Obviously, game script didn't favor him. It's just, I don't know. I think they're going to try to still ride Cook a little bit more this next week. Shakir just still, I think, will end up with the most receptions out of any wide receiver.
All right, so that brings us to our last game. We did it, boys. Only 2 hours and 5 minutes into it, and we've made it. We have your boys, the Commanders, heading to Cincinnati. Cincinnati is 8-point favorites. Jaden Daniels, we all have start with a little comment from Lee, Rookie of the Year.
First
Right now,
rookie quarterback since 1971 to have his first 2 games that over 500 total yards, 0 turnovers. Let's fucking go.
That's awesome because I feel like a lot. I mean, that he consistently improved throughout college, but even leading up to the draft, there was some videos of like him in the room with the coaches going over plays, and they were trying to like, so what are you reading in this defense? They'd be like, I'll throw a touchdown at that point. And granted, first or second team to beat second team to not score a touchdown and beat a team who scored 3 touchdowns in NFL history. You told me that was 1989 last time that happened?
1989, yeah. I
That
can't
is
remember. I think it was the Vikings. They won on a safety in overtime, 23-21.
that's insane though. The fact that you guys got into the position on the field to kick 7 field goals, but didn't hit on any of them, and then the whole kicker for the Giants, they went down. I digress.
We
So we
scored a
got
touchdown. By the way, real quick, we scored a touchdown on the very first play of that game. Austin Eckler housed a kick return, which is when Gano got hurt, but it got called back for a illegal block in the back.
oh, blocking the back is the most frustrating of all of the penalties, in my opinion. Most of the time, it was never needed. Like no one needed to touch that guy; it was already won.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So for the starts, though, on the Washington side of the ball, it is pretty much just Jaden Daniels. Mason and Lee have Brian Robinson Jr. listed as a start as well. I have him as a flex. Small difference there. Terry McLaurin, me and Mason have him listed as a flex. Lee as a start. Little bit discouraging start for the first 2 weeks, but they have just narrowly missed on some big plays. And I do think that Jaden Daniels, he's interpreting the league quick enough. He's not making mistakes, and eventually he'll turn those missed opportunities into opportunities. So faith in McLaurin moving forward. Do you think he's a buy low candidate in redraft? And I mean, I guess even there or more so in dynasty since he's older. Everybody else we have though is a sit on the other side of the ball. Joe Burrow, Zach Moss starts for all 3. Jamar Chase start for all 3. T. Higgins, another comment that made me laugh. I said flex if active. Mason said start, and Lee said, "Damn it."
Okay, so hold up, Lee. Did you say damn it because this T. Higgins injury makes that trade of ours look better for me, or what?
I'm very frustrated by T. Higgins in general. So not necessarily the trade. It's very frustrating. I'm sure he's frustrated. It was the Thursday before opening game, and he's like, I've never felt better going into a season, and then you miss the first 2 weeks of the season. Jesus Christ. Rub some dirt on it, man. Get your ass out there. You're trying to get a contract. Your team's 0-2. What the f- is going on here?
Yeah.
It's just, Evan, if you're listening out there, You might have
Don't
been
you do
right.
it. Don't
might
you
have
give
been
him
right.
any credit for this.
You
This
might have
is
been right.
the whole argument is when T. Higgins plays, he's great. He's a little boomer bust, but he's great more often than not. But he just gets injured so fucking frequently. It's so frustrating. Yeah. I liked your comment of damn it because I feel that in my heart. Other than that, though, we have the Zach Moss start. We talked about that. Chase Brown, Andre Yosevas, Trenton Irwin, Jermaine Burton all sits. Although I really wish they would give Jermaine Burton some more snaps. Insanely limited snaps last week and turned 2 targets into at least one big play. And then Mike Gesicki, that was the last name we are going to bring up today. Mike Gesicki has a huge game. Was it just the way that game felt and they saw that they could take advantage of an opportunity? Or do you think this is a thing moving forward, at least while T. Higgins is out?
I don't know.
Fair.
Burrow has definitely he's elevated some tight ends over his career. So this may be the next in the line, but it's been a really weird season. We know Cincinnati starts slow. There's so many other options. Yoshavash, 2 catches for 7 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Wow.
Those if Gesicki's going to be a thing, he has to be getting those targets. Have such non-existent yardage. You're getting those catches inside the 5-yard line, and they're going to your second, really third, or even fourth option at wide receiver. So I'm hesitant to really buy into Gesicki. You might could trade him to a team that's really tight end desperate right now. He's not really. I think there'll be better streaming options throughout the season. And before we wrap up, also I will let Mason answer, but I have a bone to pick and a question for you, Dan.
Shoot.
You want to comment on Gesicki right quick, Mason, before I go there?
Oh yeah. Maybe this week he's if you really need to play for streaming, just even if T. Higgins is playing, he might be more out there kind of as a decoy, not be used to 100% of the game plan yet. But don't buy into him because if Jamar Chase and T. Higgins are both on the field, they're going to be the two getting targets. The ball will be thrown around to other people a little more. But if Joe Burrow can get it going, which we know we're used to seeing him have slow starts to the season. So when they get it going, it's going to be them too. Nobody else is going to be a reliable target. So don't buy into him. But if you have him already, if you're streaming Titans, why not throw him in there?
Really quick, just before Lee, you hit me with the question. I was just looking at it. Mike Gesicki, even with that game, I don't know if this is good or bad. 47% of snaps had the 9 targets and 7 receptions for 91 yards. Drew Sample in week 2 outsnapped him 52%. Eric All also 52% of snaps. So it's like when he was on the field, they're using him. So, like Mason, you're saying, if T. Higgins is back on the field, likely less snaps for Mike Gesicki in this role where he's kind of being used more so as a second receiving option. But if he's not on the field for those receiving options, is he now going to be outsnapped by Drew Sample and Eric All for roles that are more traditionally fulfilled by a tight end? Yet to see. Like you said, Mason, again, Mike Gesicki probably an okay streamer if you're desperate, but start anybody that you drafted over him. Lee, what is this question?
How dare you?
That's it? That's the question?
How dare,
How
that is
dare you?
There's a question mark on the end of that.
Egads.
You have Brian Robinson listed as a flex. Okay. 17 carries.
I almost changed it before we headed into the show, but I was like, he'll know if I changed it. So continue though. Hit me with the
carries.
How dare I, Lee?
How dare you? 17 carries, 133 yards, 7.8 a carry, with a 40-yard run on a 3rd and 1. And if anybody saw it, it was one of those plays that it looks like my kids' team. We've got one running back who's just so much better than everybody on the field. He runs into the pile. There's 10 guys around him, and then he's just gone. That's what that play looked like against the Giants. He was right now on the season for a half-point PPR, and that's what we're doing. He's running back 12. He had no touchdowns. He did the performance last week. No touchdowns. He has a nose for the end zone. He got one week 1. So you're really telling me that there's 24 running backs you would rather start than Brian Robinson this week?
I'm telling you that you guys are heading to Cincinnati and have the worst secondary in the league. T. Higgins did get it. It says progressing in the right direction as of 2 days ago. He ends up on the field. I think that even without Higgins, but maybe if he's on the field a little bit more so, you guys are going to struggle to have opportunities to run the ball at all. And Austin Eckler, I think Brian Robinson is still a underappreciated pass catcher for what he's actually able to do. But Austin Eckler is the more traditional pass catcher, and Jaden Daniels is going to scramble with the ball more often than he's going to check down. So this was primarily game script where he was moved from starter to flex. And this is me predicting a game. It can go any of which ways. But I do think that the Bengals passing attack is their strength and that they will control the clock, the game script, and you guys will be forced into more passing scenarios especially than comparison to the Giants.
That's fair, but I think his pass catching is underrated. That was a big part of last year. And I hear you on Eckler, but Brian Robinson's clearly been the running back 1 with Eckler as a change of pace. So to me, again, coming off of that game, I don't see him being outside of RB2 range. And just because you said that, I hope Malik Neighbors breaks the all-time record and has over 336 receiving yards against you and just completely lights the city of Cleveland on fire. I'm not predicting that, but I am pulling for it.
I have Neighbors on my team. I root for the Browns way more than my fantasy teams.
Right.
But even if he got 136 yards, you said?
337, the all-time NFL record.
No, I cannot. I cannot support that. I cannot support this. That means we lose for sure. I was like, we can give up 136 to Neighbors, and the Giants might have like 180 offensive yards. So I can get behind both, but 336 we're fucked. So
can anybody name that guy who was 336? I bet you can't name him. He's got a great name.
Give me a decade.
80s. 80s. Nobody's gonna be able to name him because I've never heard of him, and I'm old enough to have heard of him.
All right,
Flipper Anderson. Anderson with the Los Angeles Rams went for 336.
Yeah, no, I've never heard of his name.
Never heard of him
before, ever probably. Cooper Anderson. Fun fact, though. Honestly, we should get some weird fact of it. We used to start our shows actually at the very beginning of the show. Very first episodes, we'd hit you with the fun fact and then give you one at the end of the episode. Maybe we bring this shit back.
Let's get it going. A random fact or random stat.
Yeah, and then we'll answer it at the beginning of the next one.
How is he not a Dolphin at some point? And he may have been, but Flipper Anderson should have been a Dolphin catching passes from Dan Marino. I mean, that would have just been the marketing opportunities
of a lifetime. Yeah. Especially in Miami, I feel like there's a big city, big marketing, all that shit. The one thing I have written at the bottom of the show, Dockley, and I got to put it in our bets here. Rams and Falcons both win. Quote from Lee.
Outright.
You stand by it?
Standing by it. Hey, if you want to parlay, if our parlay man is still here, put those two together. You'll get some good odds. And we do have a last-second question coming in here. Let's take that before we wrap. We appreciate you hanging with us, Scorpio. So Scorpio asks us, should he trade CeeDee Lamb for Tank Dell Aaron, Jesus Christ, what a trade.
Whoa.
For Tank Dell, Aaron Jones, Mark Andrews, and Brock Purdy.
How large is your league? 10, 12 man? Because if it's 10 man, absolutely not. 12 man, still most likely not, but that is a lot that is given up.
I mean, if I'm 0-2, I mean, some of this depends on where you're at right now, Scorpio. If you're 0-2, if you're devastated by injury, it's a 10-man league.
Don't do it.
If you're devastated by injuries and you're 0-2, I would consider it. So
Don't do it.
Let's just say you have Tua and Jordan Love, or not even that. You have Tua and no great backup, and you have Christian McCaffrey as your top pick. Or no, you had to get CeeDee Lamb. You wouldn't have McCaffrey as well. You have Evan Ingram, Tua, and Cooper Kupp on your team. Those are three guys you need to replace. I would consider it. But if you're not 0-2, the talent at the top is so much higher. That I wouldn't be able to take that unless I was just really devastated by injuries and desperate for a win this week. And here's the other thing. You have to be able to get that trade in depending on your waiting period and if people can vote. If you're making that trade, it needs to be to win now this week, and you need to be able to get it in before Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, unless you are 2-0 and your team is very injured, I would say no. The only thing that would make me consider it is if it's a 2-quarterback league and you're very weak at the QB position as well. Purdy does kind of add some interest, but if it's just a 1-quarterback league where you're not desperate at the quarterback position, it's a definite no.
Yeah, don't do it. I say don't do it. 10-man league, you need those guys that are true difference makers. CeeDee Lamb is that, and he's even given you some solid weeks so far with the Cowboys not being in a favorable game script for CeeDee Lamb in week 1, and then being in a favorable game plan for part of the game, but really being blown out of the water to the point where they do not want to play their starters.
Give us some more info. We're about to wrap it up, Scorpio, but give us some more info on Twitter. I'd like to see your entire roster and know your record to really weigh in a little bit better. But just in the vacuum, yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with the guys. Just giving up that top end talent. I love Tank going forward. I think he's due and he's gonna eat, but he's gonna have some off weeks. Aaron Jones is gonna get hurt. Brock Purdy is middle of the road. Mark Andrews is pretty good. It's just that high end talent's tough to give up, even for that kind of haul. But yeah, guys, so we really appreciate you joining us again. Again, the guys that stuck out that you're still here, we're 2 hours and 24 minutes in. Thank you very much for supporting us. Please follow, comment on Twitter, continue to engage. We really appreciate the engagement tonight. We're going to be back next week with another episode. Thank you, Scorpio. Thank you, everybody else. We'll be back another week. Hope everybody's team gets the win this week, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
All right. Thank you, guys.